Every team, every topic, everywhere. This is Believe.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to a very special emergency podcast episode of Attack the Baseline, a WNBA podcast where every episode we attack our baseline knowledge of the WNBA. We have news about the expansion draft that will be taking place this December, the Golden State Valkyries joining the WNBA. We have news, we have details, we understand how it's going to work, and today, Kristen and I, your hosts, are going to walk you through all the details that we know at this hour as the news was announced this afternoon. Before we get into all those details, Kristen, how are we on this Monday afternoon?
Good. Maybe you understand everything about this.
I think I do.
I'm grasping.
Grasping?
Yep. But it's so exciting. We're finally starting. It's been just talks and rumors this whole year. So here we go. We know some of the rules. We kind of know how it's going to work, at least the expansion part. So let's get into it.
Correct. Okay, so we're going to be going through some of the questions that our listeners have sent in. We have gotten questions about this, which is exciting, so we're going to cover those. If you have a question of something that we didn't answer on this emergency podcast, please send us an email, attackthebaseline@gmail.com, or connect with us on our Twitter at @ATBpod_. But here is the press release that was provided by the WNBA and the Valkyries this afternoon at 2 in the afternoon. The WNBA's 13th franchise is the Golden State Valkyries, beginning play in 2025. Golden State will select from the designated pool of available players as determined by each of the current 12 teams in the WNBA. Each of the existing teams will be required to submit to the league office a roster list that includes every player to whom the player has rights. So each of the WNBA team submits a list. Here are all the players that I have rights to, which means players that they have under contract or that they are restricted or reserved. I'll get into that later. All the unrestricted free agents are not players that the team has the rights to.
Okay. I mean, kind of silly that they have to submit a list. Shouldn't the league know?
Right.
but okay,
it's
fine.
just a way to let the teams get fined if they don't follow the rules.
Okay.
The deadline for submission of that roster list will be determined at a later date, but it is expected to be approximately 10 days prior to the date of the expansion draft, which we know is December 6th. So 10 days before December 6th, November 26th, will be the day that they have to submit this list of players. But we already know what the list is.
Right.
We can just Google.
Okay.
Each team's submitted roster list will be required to designate a maximum of 6 protected players who will not be available for selection in the expansion draft. All other players on each of the team's rosters list shall be eligible for selection by the Valkyries. So any player that's under contract that does not get protected, any restricted free agent that is not protected, and of course any unrestricted player, free agent, wouldn't be protected by a team. This is the pool of players that will be available for the Valkyries to build their roster off of in the expansion draft. And Golden State will have the opportunity to acquire the players' contracts of, the negotiating rights to, and one player from each of those 12 teams. If they take one from the Liberty, they can't take a second player from the Liberty. They could take an unrestricted free agent that was from the Liberty, because that's not a part of the Liberty. That's just a free agent. But still, the Valkyries will only be able to select one player from across the entire league who is eligible to become an unrestricted free agent following the 2024 season. So Kristen has a list of all the unrestricted free agents. We'll talk about that in a bit. But of that list, the Valkyries get to pick one of those unrestricted free agents and make them kind of like a restricted free agent. We get their rights. We, as the Valkyries, have the opportunity to be the first to provide them a contract. Or if another team provides them a contract, we can match that. Between the time that the roster lists are submitted and a designated time on the day before the expansion draft, Golden State will be permitted to make trades with existing teams.
That is crazy to me.
It is crazy.
Like, it kind of just seems they can negotiate that they're kind of just being a middleman. It seems like in between, but why? Because the other teams won't be able to trade at this time, just them.
Well, I mean, who are they trading with if they're not trading with the other teams?
Well, yeah, but like the Lynx and the Aces can't make a trade. It has to go through the Valkyries.
Correct. Right. Right. So this is from an article from CBS Sports. Can the Valkyries make trades? Yes, between the time that the other 12 teams submit their official roster lists and the expansion draft.
Oh, so 10 days.
So in that 10-day window,
Yeah.
the Valkyries will be able to make trades. That includes an agreement to select a particular player from the list of available expansion draft players and trade that player to a team other than their existing team. So they can play that middleman role and like take a player that's like, I'm going to take them and then trade them to you.
It is interesting because, you know, the Lynx could call them up and say, we are interested in whatever other player on the Sun. It's kind of like they have the right to refuse them and say, no, I want them. I'm going to take them. I don't want you to have them.
Right. And they can also make an agreement to select or not select a particular player from such trading teams list of available expansion draft players, which is a wordy way to basically say what we just said.
Okay.
So,
But I feel like this is not going to happen. Maybe one. The W's not keen on trading to begin with.
the same way that the NBA is. If you're interested in this exercise, we're going to talk about this a lot in the off season, especially in the lead up to this expansion draft in December. There was a really good podcast, the Hoop Collective, with Brian Windhorst from ESPN, where he does. This is from literally last week because of all the expansion talk in the WNBA with Portland. They did a mock expansion in the NBA where they added 2 teams and did this exercise. Now that's 30 teams protecting players and them having to pick from these 30 teams. So there's a lot more going on, but it's the rules that they have to follow in that are basically the same rules that we're following in this WNBA expansion draft, except with how the contracts work in the WNBA.
Yeah. Okay, so each team is going to end up protecting 6 players.
Correct.
I think we're going to do the exercise, in a couple weeks.
Yes.
After the season is over, we'll go through each team and say who we think that they're going to protect. And do like a mock expansion for the Valkyries.
Right.
But the unrestricted free agents are not players available that they can protect.
Yeah.
I think we should define these 3. There's 3 designations of free agents.
Correct. So the designations, the titles that are important to know is reserved, restricted, and unrestricted. A reserved player is somebody who has 3 or less years of experience in the WNBA and ultimately is a restricted free agent where the player or the teams that drafted them has the first right to offer that player a contract before they get to free agent with anybody else, which is basically the same way that a restricted free agent works after 4 years of experience in the WNBA.
Well, so what's the difference?
So let's figure out what the difference is as I reread what I was learning today. So the difference is that a reserved player can only singularly negotiate with their own team. They do not have the rights to negotiate with a different team. A restricted free agent has the rights to negotiate with another team, but their team that owns their rights, that they're restricted under, has the ability to match any contract that another team offered them. So a good example of this in the NBA, as Sixers fans, there was a center, Paul Reed. He was on the Sixers last year. In free agency in the summer, he was offered a contract by the Utah Jazz for like $8 million or whatever. And the Sixers had like a 24-hour window, I think it's actually 48 hours, where they have to decide whether or not they're going to match that contract or let him go to Utah. So like once the offer sheet comes in from the other team, it's like, all right, you're on the clock. If you want him, you got to match it, or else he's going to go. So that's what a restricted free agent is. So in that fourth year, you have the ability to negotiate with other teams. And players would want to do that because they have experience. They have a, more of a body of work where they may think that they can get a better offer from another team. So that's why they are able to negotiate. And ultimately, it's a way for them to make more money. But then after that, when they're 5 years and older in the WNBA, they become unrestricted free agents.
Always.
Okay. Which is what is interesting because in the NBA, there's still like bird rights, like it's based after Larry Bird, where a player that's been with a team long enough can be restricted to that team. But I do not believe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that those rules apply in the W. Once you're a 5-year vet, you can get paid by any team. Any team can offer you a contract if you're a free agent. So there are so many of these 5+ year vets that are unrestricted free agents this year. And when we go and look at our rules for our expansion draft, the Valkyries only have the ability to restrict one of those free agents. So they can point and say, theoretically, Brianna Stewart, who is an unrestricted free agent, we would like to restrict your rights and be the team that can be the first to offer you a full contract. And then Stewie could just be like, nah, I'm good.
Right.
And peace. This is not a coring designation.
Okay, talk about that.
Which is another thing. So if a player becomes an unrestricted free agent in the WNBA, there is this designation type called a core player, which we talked about way back when in our Valkyries episode. But now I better understand it. A core player is kind of like the franchise tag in the NFL, if you've ever heard of that, which is where a team basically says, you're going to stay with us. We're going to make you a core part of our team. And what that designation means is they're offered a 1-year supermax contract. So they get the most money that they could be paid over a single year with complete trade protections. They can't be traded. They get a lot of powers if they're cored. But when a player is cored, they have the right to negotiate a contract with the team. So let's say Brianna Stewart, who's an unrestricted free agent, gets cored by the New York Liberty, which is probably going to be the case. They're not going to want to even risk her going to another team. So we want to take the rights that you have, restrict them so that we can negotiate with you first and say, here's a 1-year supermax. But like I said, they can negotiate and they could give her, let's say, a 4-year supermax to stay in New York. But they use one of their core designations. A player in the WNBA can only be cored 2 times.
2 years.
2 years of being cored.
Yep.
Okay.
Once you're cored for 2 years or more, 2 is the limit.
So how I understand it then is let's say you renegotiate the contract after being cored, and you renegotiate the 1-year supermax contract to a 2-year supermax contract.
Sure.
You're cored for 2 years.
Yep.
So then you can't be cored ever again.
Correct.
And that's crazy.
Yeah. So there's a very long list of unrestricted free agents that the Valkyries could pick one from. We'll get into later about, the different like social dynamics of these players, of why they might want to pick someone or might not. You don't want them to immediately leave in free agency, which probably will happen around the middle of January. But there are a couple, 6, I believe, unrestricted free agents this year who cannot be cored again, who have already been cored 2 years. So that's Tina Charles on the Dream, Dewana Bonner and Brianna Jones on the Sun, Natasha Howard on the Wings, Brittany Griner on the Mercury, and Nneka Ogwumike on the Storm. So while these teams are going to be looking at coring somebody, I imagine most teams are going to try to core someone just to kind of get that extra one player that they're protecting, because it becomes you can protect 6 and then core someone too. So that's 7.
Yes, I believe that's the case. I believe
Okay.
that's the case.
So these teams are going to be looking at players to core. Say, I think the Storm would ideally want to core Nneka,
But they can't.
They can't core her because she's been cored 2 years.
Right. Hey, it's Post John here. We have some clarification. According to Alexa Filippo of ESPN, a player that has been cored for 2 years cannot be selected in the expansion draft. That means all these players that Kristen just listed are not available. So when in the next 20 seconds I say that Nneka could be selected by the Valkyries, that is not the case. So ultimately, Nneka is going to be an unrestricted free agent. But that doesn't mean, just because, sure, the Valkyries may say, we like Nneka Ogwumike. We would love to restrict her rights so that we're the first team that can offer her a contract. But again, Nneka does not, there's no rules about Nneka signing that contract.
Right, she doesn't have to.
She doesn't have to. I guess, theoretically, a team could offer, let's say, a crazy, crazy contract. Another team could offer a crazy, crazy contract to Nneka,
But,
and the Valkyries could match it.
They can't offer a crazy, crazy contract. At least with the current CBA.
Because that's a whole thing that complicates this too, because we're going to be doing the same activity next year with 2 teams and a new CBA.
Right. Like, the highest paid player is Jackie Young, $252,000.
Right.
They can't go much past that.
No.
So it's not like the Valkyries can offer them such a much bigger contract than any other team can.
Correct. And players aren't going to want to sign contracts because the new CBA will inflate salaries.
Right. So really, any of these contracts for this year are going to be only 1-year contracts.
That was what we would expect.
Okay.
One question that we got is, when can a player sign? When can a player sign? The contracts, free agency, starts on January 21st.
Oh, okay.
But there's a window of time shortly before that where the restricted free agents can negotiate. You can't be negotiating yet. Between December 6th, when the Valkyries select their players, and we know who the restricted free agents are in the pool, nobody can be negotiating. They're not supposed to be. They
Correct.
will. They will.
Right, they're not
because they
supposed to
tamper. Teams tamper.
Yeah.
But they can't legally negotiate until January,
They
basically.
at least are going to have to talk to, the teams. Okay, so let's take an example. Kelsey Plum on the Aces is an unrestricted free agent. And I imagine they may want to core her. They're going to have to talk to her before this free agency.
Well,
Or
see,
is that not what you're saying?
I think if they are, my apologies, and I may be misunderstanding this. I think if a player is restricted, they can communicate with the team, but they can't sign anything.
Okay.
So, a team can offer, there's a certain ability that team has if a player is restricted to talk in certain detail. And then there's CBA mumbo jumbo, and we are not, experts in the WNBA CBA.
In legal documents. Financial legal documents, no.
But I think they're there's a certain level of negotiation. like a player is going to know if they want to be where they're going to be.
Right.
Which is why I think, like, if I am the Valkyries, I'm going to try to use that single restriction on an unrestricted free agent on a player that I believe would be excited to come there.
Correct.
You know, you don't go out and try to, sign Alyssa Thomas without, having the guarantee that you're going to sign DeWanna Bonner.
Exactly.
Like you mentioned the social dynamics. There are players that are like so locked in with one another and just franchises in general that they might not want to go anywhere. And when they're unrestricted, they ultimately have that right to sign wherever they want to sign. So it's pretty free range.
I mean, honestly, looking at this list of unrestricted free agents who have not already been cored and who their current team may not want to core them, so they will be potentially available for the Valkyries to choose. A lot of them are older, so like Tiffany Hayes, Sydney Colson, and Alicia Clark on the Aces, they're all going to be unrestricted free agents, but like the Valkyries aren't going to waste, on them when they're older. They may just retire.
There's no reason.
Tiffany Hayes was retired already. Like she'll probably just retire again.
You can threaten to retire. You can be like, I'm not coming there. I will retire if you pick me.
Right. So, like, I'm also trying to see some of their ages. But maybe one person that is possible for one unrestricted free agent that the Valkyries could be interested in is Kia Nurse. Because I'm not sure if the Sparks will want to core her. Their teams...
No, I don't think they would want to core Kia Nurse.
Right. They have her and Crystal Dangerfield, who may not even be on the team currently anymore.
I think she signed a 1-year extension, but I might be wrong about that. Anyway.
They're the only unrestricted free agents currently on the Sparks. I don't think the Sparks will want to core her.
Right.
And the Sparks probably will not be... Potentially, they have the best chance of getting Paige this year.
Right.
But I don't think they're, like, gonna be all of a sudden so good. And also being in California already. So I think Kia Nurse, and she's 28, so she could be someone that's
the age range that feels right to me. The 27 to 30-year-old, like, experienced veteran that can be, a culture setter, a team leader, someone that, is going to organize the Valkyries. But again, we shouldn't expect the Valkyries to field a good team right away. And I should highlight, I know listener Tim is out there saying, we don't know when the Valkyries are going to pick. Joe Lacob has said and made it explicitly clear that they don't know when the pick is yet. Like, we're operating this assuming that they're going to have the 5th overall pick, that they're not going to be a lottery team. But there's still the chance that they theoretically could be a lottery team. But we shouldn't expect them to be a good team out of the gate. They should be bad for at least 2 years. And it would be smart for them to be bad.
Right.
Because Juju Watkins is available in 2027. There's a bunch of players available in 2027. And there's another expansion draft next year. So it's just going to be crazy. Just be bad for 2 seasons. Just be bad.
Yeah. Okay, so Kia Nurse is my pick of potential. I also think Courtney Vandersloot, even though she is older, I think if the Liberty decide to core Stewie and then they protect... Oh, I guess they could... I don't know. They could protect Kennedy Burke. I'm just looking at the free agents list. And then Courtney Vandersloot is the only other unrestricted free agent.
Right. And like, there's a world where the Valkyries could choose that one unrestricted free agent and decide to core them.
I don't think.
But I don't expect that.
I don't think there's any need for the Valkyries to core somebody right now.
No.
See, you have no idea what your team is going to look like.
Yep.
None.
But it just, they theoretically could.
Yeah, they could.
But that one unrestricted player that they select is not auto-cored. They do not automatically get a contract. They still have to negotiate with the team.
Yeah. Okay. I think in this case, being an unrestricted free agent is a good thing for these players.
I would say.
Because there's just so much up in the air at this point, and you kind of want to be able to take advantage of getting a better salary at this point.
Mm-hmm. And when the CBA gives you a boost.
Yeah.
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 I think it's a good thing, for sure.
Do we think that 6 players is too many to protect?
That is a good question.
When these playoff rosters are 7 deep.
Well, it was 7 last night in the Lynx Sun game, but it was 8/9 in the Liberty Aces game that we saw, game 1 of round 2. Mm-hmm. I don't think that 6 is too many. I would hope that the new CBA actually expands the roster sizes so that we can go to maybe 13 or even 14 players on a team as opposed to just 12. So that, like, if you're protecting 6 slots out of 14, that sounds a little nicer than protecting 6 out of 12. But I do feel like if we weren't on the precipice of CBA craziness, then 6 wouldn't be too much. It's just maybe because the CBA coming up is so hectic and so many people are unsigned that it doesn't feel that weird. Because remember, and I say remember, one reason in expansion drafts that a player could go unprotected is because a team doesn't want their contract on their books. They could just be, it's a free way to get off of a player's contract. But there's not really anybody in the WNBA that I feel like is like a bad contract player because the money's just not as big as the NBA. So, no, I don't think 6 is too many. I think it's fine.
Okay.
And one of the last questions or interesting notes that came in from friend of the pod, Laura, which we mentioned the AT and Dewana of it all. Like, it's pretty hard. I'd be pretty hard pressed that, Alyssa Thomas and Dewana Bonner will either both retire or they will both be on the same team wherever that is. And it might not necessarily be Connecticut.
I feel like Connecticut will core Alyssa Thomas, Dewana Bonner. The Valkyries are not going to pick Dewana Bonner. No. She's just going to leave. So then they'll just re-sign. Connecticut will just sign Dewana again.
For a year.
And
and they'll probably use that core to its normal use, a 1-year Supermax for AT.
Yeah, because of the CBA.
Correct.
That's true.
And then I think AT retires the year after that. I think she goes 1 more year.
Any of these cord contracts are just going to be 1 year.
Right.
I guess at this point.
Yep. I think that's the case.
That kind of stinks for the players because you kind of want to get the most out of it as you can. Mm-hmm. Like Gabby Williams said something before she came to Seattle where she was answering questions and someone said, why didn't you play for Seattle for the whole year? She was like, why? She said, if I could be cored, I would play for Seattle the whole year. So it seems like at least some of these players want to be cored.
Yeah, it's the most money you can get in a single year.
Yeah, but then you can't leave.
Yeah, but you might want to be cored because that means the team wants you.
Yeah. Sure.
There's something about being wanted.
Right. So then you would think that they would want to be cored and also negotiate a longer cored contract.
Correct.
But they're not doing that this year.
No, because
of the
they don't know
CBA.
how much money they could get on the other side of it.
Yeah, wow.
And then to expand on the AT and DB of it all, there's this rekindled relationship between Dejanay and Nalissa Smith. Nalissa Smith, we know, is still under contract with the Fever. Mm-hmm. Didn't have a lot of play time in the playoffs.
I imagine she'll be reserved.
Right, and
for the Fever.
And Dejanay, well, she is because she's under contract.
Protected.
She'll be protected.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting.
Oh, let me check.
They didn't have a plan for her, so maybe they cut
true.
bait.
They might. No, I don't see.
It would be pretty shocking.
I mean, unless they're protecting Katie Lou Samuelson, I think she's the next person.
Who knows? But Dejanay is a restricted free agent, right?
Restricted, yes.
Restricted. So Connecticut would probably be pretty, they will protect her.
They're protecting Dejanay, yeah.
And they'll negotiate because Dejanay's been very good. Mm-hmm. Most improved player. Not to talk about awards here,
true.
but
technically, Indiana could offer Dejanay a contract that the Sun would then have to match. If they don't, she could go
correct
to Indiana.
Correct.
Okay.
I think that's it. I think we covered as much as it is. Again, if there's more questions that you have about this expansion, we're going to learn a couple more details, but I'm pretty sure that sets the stage. And sorry if we sound like we rambled. I wanted to just get it out there because
no, it's good to
it's
learn.
Exciting to have news about it.
Okay, so tune in December 6th. Did you already say that? On
Yes.
ESPN for this expansion draft.
We will be there no matter what.
Then we'll have a rookie draft
in
March.
And free agents will sign
free agency in between
January, February.
All right.
So we know the league calendar a little bit better today. We all attacked our baselines a little bit. If you have more questions, again, send us an email at attackthebaseline@gmail.com or connect with us on our Twitter at @ATBpod_. We hope you enjoy this very special emergency pod. Glad that we could get it out to you. Kristen, I'm looking at the baseline. What are we going to do?
Attack it.
Thank you so much for listening. We will talk to you soon, talking more WNBA playoffs. But until then, goodbye for now.
If you like the show, please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe. It really does help the show to grow. Thank you for listening.